Robert Miller checked his watch as he pushed the heavy mop bucket down the empty hallway. 11 o'clock at night. His shift at Lincoln Memorial Hospital was finally over. His back ached from 8 hours of cleaning floors, emptying trash bins, and scrubbing bathrooms that most people never even noticed were clean. He was 52 years old, and every single one of those years felt heavy on his shoulders tonight. The November wind howled outside the windows, rattling the glass in its frames. He could hear the rain hammering against the building like thousands of tiny fists trying to get in. Robert grabbed his thin jacket from his locker in the basement. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. The zipper was broken, held together with a safety pin his daughter had attached last winter. He looked at that safety pin for a moment and smiled. His daughter always tried to fix things for him, even when they didn't have money for proper repairs. He walked toward the back service entrance, the one the janitors and kitchen staff used. Nobody important ever came through this door. It was just for people like him. People who kept the hospital running but stayed invisible while doing it. The moment he pushed the door open, the wind nearly knocked him backward. The storm was worse than he thought. Rain came down so hard it looked like sheets of gray metal falling from the sky. The streetlights flickered and some of them had already gone dark. He could see trash cans rolling down the street and tree branches scattered across the parking lot. Robert pulled his jacket tighter and was about to step into the storm when he heard something. A sound that didn't belong, a groan maybe or a cough. He stopped and listened. There it was again. He turned to his right toward the darker corner of the building where the dumpsters sat. At first he couldn't see anything, just shadows and rain, but then something moved. A shape slumped against the brick wall. Robert's heart jumped. He rushed over, his shoes splashing through puddles that were already ankle-deep. An old man was collapsed there, sitting in the water, his back against the wall. His clothes were expensive, Robert could tell that right away. A nice suit, the kind that probably cost more than Robert made in 3 months. But the suit was soaked through, ruined. The man's white hair was plastered to his head, and his lips had a bluish tint that scared Robert. Sir? Sir, can you hear me? Robert knelt down in the cold water, ignoring how it soaked through his pants. The old man's eyes opened slightly. They were unfocused, confused. He tried to say something, but his teeth were chattering too hard. His whole body was shaking like a leaf in the wind. "We need to get you inside," Robert said. He tried to help the man stand, but the stranger's legs wouldn't hold him. He was too weak, too cold, too far gone. Robert looked at the hospital door behind him. That would be the logical thing, right? Take him to the emergency room. Get him help. But Robert had worked at this hospital for 15 years. He knew how it worked. They'd need insurance information, ID. They'd need the man to fill out forms, answer questions. This man couldn't even stand up, let alone answer questions. And if he didn't have insurance or couldn't prove who he was right now, they might not even admit him. They'd stabilize him and send him away. Robert had seen it happen before. The system had rules, and rules didn't care if you were dying in the rain. The old man's shaking got worse. His eyes rolled back. Robert had to make a decision, and he had to make it fast. He looked at his wallet. He'd gotten paid 3 days ago, but most of that money was already gone. Rent, electricity, food. What he had left was $23. That was supposed to last him until Friday, another 4 days away. $23 was his bus fare to work and back. It was his lunch money. It was the buffer between him and complete disaster. Lose that money and he'd be walking to work. He'd be skipping meals. He'd be in trouble. But this man would die if Robert didn't do something. Robert's hands shook as he pulled out his phone. Not from the cold, but from what he was about to do. He called for a taxi. In this storm, with most drivers already gone home, it took 3 tries before someone answered. "I need a cab at Lincoln Memorial Hospital. The service entrance in the back." "It's an emergency." The driver wanted to refuse. The storm was too dangerous. But Robert begged. He offered extra money he didn't have. Finally, the driver agreed. 10 minutes felt like an hour. Robert sat in the rain with the old man, trying to keep him conscious. He talked to him, though he didn't know if the man could even hear him. "Stay with me, okay? Help is coming. You're going to be fine. Just stay awake." The man mumbled something. Robert couldn't make out the words, but he could hear the fear in them. This was somebody important, Robert was sure of it. The suit, the watch on his wrist, the way he carried himself even in his confused state. This was someone who was used to being in control, and right now he had no control at all. The taxi finally arrived, headlights cutting through the rain. Robert waved frantically. The driver, a middle-aged woman with a concerned face, jumped out to help. "Hospital?" she asked. "No," Robert said. "The Evergreen Motel 3 blocks down. He needs somewhere warm, somewhere dry right now." Together, they got the old man into the back seat. Robert climbed in after him, holding him upright. The drive took less than 5 minutes, but every second counted. The man's shaking had gotten so bad that Robert was terrified he might be having a seizure. At the motel, Robert paid for the taxi. $15 gone in an instant. The driver helped them inside, refused Robert's attempt to tip her, and wished them luck before disappearing back into the storm. The motel clerk, a young guy playing games on his phone, barely looked up. $50 for the night. Robert felt his stomach drop. $50. He only had $8 left, please, Robert said. "This man is in trouble. He needs help. Can you work with me? I have $8 now, and I can bring you the rest on Friday." The clerk looked at the old man, dripping water all over the floor, shaking uncontrollably. He looked at Robert, whose desperation was written all over his face. "Give me what you got," the clerk finally said. "Room 12. And get him warm before he dies." Robert handed over every dollar he had left. The clerk gave him a key and a towel. Room 12 was small and old, but it was warm and dry. Robert helped the man to the bed, got his wet jacket off, and wrapped him in every blanket he could find. He turned the heater up as high as it would go. Then he went to the vending machine in the hallway. He had no money left. Not a single dollar. But there was a coffee machine that someone had left open, and he managed to get a cup of hot water. He found a tea bag in his jacket pocket from the hospital cafeteria and made weak tea. He helped the old man drink it. Slowly over the next hour, the shaking stopped. Color came back to his face. His eyes focused. "Thank you," the man whispered. Just those 2 words, but they carried a weight that Robert felt in his chest. Robert stayed until the man fell asleep. He made sure he was breathing steadily. He left his own jacket, the one with the broken zipper, on the chair beside the bed in case the man needed it. Then Robert stepped outside into the rain. The storm was still raging. The motel was 3 miles from his apartment. The buses had stopped running. He had no money for another cab, so Robert Miller started walking. Through the freezing rain, through the wind that tried to push him backward, through the flooding streets, his thin work shirt soaked through in seconds, his shoes filled with water. But he walked. He walked home knowing that he'd just given away everything he had to save a stranger. He walked home not knowing if it was the smartest thing he'd ever done or the stupidest. He just knew it was the right thing. And sometimes, that's all that matters. Robert woke up the next morning feeling like he'd been hit by a truck. His whole body ached from walking 3 miles in the freezing rain. His throat felt scratchy and his head pounded. But he couldn't afford to be sick. He couldn't afford to miss work. He dragged himself out of bed and checked his wallet, even though he already knew what he'd find. Empty. Completely empty. Not a single dollar. Not even loose change. His daughter Amy was already awake in the kitchen. She was 14, smart as a whip, and trying to make breakfast with the little they had left. "Some crackers and peanut butter." "Morning, Dad," she said, smiling at him. That smile always made everything better, even on the worst days. "Morning, sweetheart." She put a plate in front of him. 4 crackers with peanut butter spread so thin you could almost see through it. He knew this was the last of the food until he got paid on Friday. That was 4 days away. "I'm not really hungry," Robert lied. "You eat mine too. Growing girl needs her breakfast." Amy looked at him with those knowing eyes. She was too smart to believe him, but too kind to argue. "Dad, you need to eat." "I'll grab something at work," he said. Another lie. The cafeteria wasn't free and he had no money. The truth was, Robert had been in tight spots before. After his wife died 3 years ago from cancer, it had been just him and Amy against the world. Medical bills had wiped out their savings. They'd lost the house and moved into this small apartment. But they'd survived. They always found a way. This time felt different, though. This time he'd willingly given away the last safety net they had, and he wasn't sure if that made him noble or just foolish. Robert took the bus to work. He'd found an old transit card in a drawer, with just enough money loaded on it for 2 more rides. That would get him to work today and tomorrow. After that, he'd have to figure something else out. At the hospital, he went straight to the basement locker room where the janitorial staff gathered. His coworker Tom, a guy about his age who'd worked there even longer than Robert, was already putting on his work uniform. "You look terrible," Tom said. "You coming down with something?" "Just tired," Robert said. "Well, try not to drop dead on us. We're short-staffed enough as it is." Robert managed a weak laugh and got to work, mopping floors, cleaning bathrooms, emptying trash. The work was mindless, which was usually a blessing, but today, it just gave him too much time to think. He kept thinking about the old man, wondering if he was okay, wondering if he'd even remember what happened. The whole thing felt like a dream now, like maybe he'd imagined it. By lunchtime, Robert's stomach was growling so loud he was embarrassed. He went to the cafeteria not to eat, but just to sit down for his break. The smell of food was torture. Sandwiches, soup, hot meals, things he couldn't afford. He sat at an empty table in the corner with a cup of water from the fountain. That's when Mrs. Chen appeared. She was the head of housekeeping, Robert's supervisor, a small Korean woman in her 60s who ran the department like a general runs an army, strict but fair. She didn't tolerate laziness, but she looked out for her people. "Robert," she said, sitting down across from him, "why aren't you eating?" "I had a big breakfast," he said. "Not hungry." She looked at him for a long moment. Mrs. Chen had a way of seeing right through people. It was one of her superpowers. "You know," she said casually, "someone left 2 sandwiches in the break room this morning. Turkey and cheese. Just sitting there. If nobody claims them by the end of the day, they'll just go bad." She stood up and walked away before he could respond. 20 minutes later, Robert found himself in the break room. Sure enough, there were 2 sandwiches wrapped in plastic on the counter. A note said, "Free to whoever needs them." Robert's eyes stung with tears he refused to let fall. He knew Mrs. Chen had put them there. He knew she'd figured out he was struggling. Part of him felt embarrassed, ashamed that his situation was so obvious. But the bigger part of him was just grateful. He ate 1 sandwich slowly, making it last. He saved the other one for Amy. The next day was Tuesday, Robert's last bus ride. After work, he'd have to walk, but he'd deal with that when the time came. He reported to work and found more food in the break room. Leftover pizza. "Didn't get eaten at yesterday's meeting," the note said. But there hadn't been any meeting yesterday. Someone was looking out for him, and he suspected it was Mrs. Chen again. Wednesday came. Robert walked to work. 6 miles, taking him an extra hour. He left before sunrise and arrived with his feet aching and his legs burning. But he made it, Tom noticed. "Why didn't you take the bus?" "Needed the exercise," Robert said with a forced smile. Thursday afternoon, while Robert was mopping the 3rd-floor hallway, Mrs. Chen found him again. "Robert, can I talk to you for a minute?" His heart sank. Maybe she was going to fire him. Maybe his struggling was affecting his work. Maybe he'd messed something up. They went into the storage closet where they kept supplies. "I've known you for 15 years, Mrs. Chen said. "You're one of the best workers I've got. You show up, you work hard, you don't complain. So I'm going to ask you straight. What's going on? And don't tell me nothing." Robert felt his walls crumbling. He'd been holding everything together, but her kindness, her genuine concern, it broke something in him. He told her, all of it. The old man in the storm, spending every dollar he had, walking home in the rain. The struggle this week, Amy missing out on her school field trip because he couldn't come up with the $40 she needed. That last part hurt the most. Watching his daughter pretend she didn't care about the trip to the science museum. Watching her tell her friends she didn't want to go anyway. Knowing she was lying to protect his feelings, Mrs. Chen listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You did a good thing," she finally said. "A stupid thing maybe, but a good thing. That man could have died, I know. But Amy, let me worry about Amy's field trip," Mrs. Chen said. "I'll handle it." "No, I can't let you. Robert Miller, I'm not asking your permission. Consider it a bonus for 15 years of excellent work." Before he could argue further, she left the closet. Friday morning arrived. Payday. Robert had never been so relieved to see a paycheck in his life. It wasn't much after taxes and insurance were taken out, but it was enough. He could buy groceries. He could put gas in his ancient car that he'd been too broke to drive all week. He could breathe again. He was cashing his check at the bank inside the hospital when the receptionist from the main lobby called his name over the intercom. "Robert Miller, please report to the main entrance." Robert Miller to the main entrance, his stomach dropped. Nobody ever called him to the main entrance. That was for doctors, for important visitors, for people who mattered. Tom was nearby and heard it too. What did you do, rob a bank? Robert had no idea. He felt a strange sense of dread as he walked through the hospital corridors toward the front lobby. His mind raced through possibilities. Had something happened to Amy? Was there an emergency? The main lobby was beautiful. Marble floors, big windows, expensive art on the walls. Robert never spent time here. This was where the doctors walked, where visitors came to see patients on the nice floors. And standing there, in an expensive gray suit, looking completely different from the last time Robert had seen him, was the old man from the storm. But he wasn't alone. 2 other men in business suits stood with him, and all 3 of them were looking at Robert like they'd been searching for him for a long time. The old man smiled, and Robert's heart started beating so hard he could hear it in his ears. "Mr. Miller," the old man said, walking toward him with his hand extended. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Robert shook his hand, speechless. His mind couldn't process what was happening. The man looked healthy, strong, completely recovered. And he was here, at Robert's work, looking for him. "I'm Dr. Harold Whitmore," the man said, "and I owe you my life." Robert stood there in the hospital lobby, very aware of his janitor's uniform, very aware of the mop and bucket he'd left by the wall, very aware that he probably smelled like cleaning chemicals. And here was this man, this Dr. Harold Whitmore, standing in front of him in a suit that probably cost more than Robert's car. "I don't understand," Robert managed to say. Dr. Whitmore smiled warmly. "Could we sit down? I have a lot to tell you, and I think you might want to be sitting for this." They moved to a quiet corner of the lobby. The 2 men with Dr. Whitmore stayed a respectful distance away, but Robert could feel them watching. One of them looked like a younger version of Dr. Whitmore. The other carried a briefcase and had the air of someone important. "First," Dr. Whitmore said, "I need to properly thank you. Last Friday night I was dying. I don't mean that dramatically. I mean clinically I was in the process of dying and you saved my life." Robert shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Dr. Whitmore said firmly. "That's exactly the point. You did what most people wouldn't do. Let me tell you what happened from my perspective." Dr. Whitmore explained that he'd been in Chicago for a medical conference. He was a retired heart surgeon, one of the top in his field. He'd rented a car to drive to dinner, but the car broke down during the storm. He'd started walking, trying to find help, but he didn't realize he was having a cardiac episode. The stress, the cold, the confusion. By the time he collapsed behind the hospital, he was in real danger. "I have vague memories of that night," Dr. Whitmore said. "I remember the rain. I remember being so cold I couldn't think straight. And I remember your face looking down at me, telling me everything would be okay." Robert felt his throat tighten. He remembered that night too. Every detail. "When I woke up the next morning in that motel room," Dr. Whitmore continued, "I had no idea where I was or how I got there. But I was alive. I was warm. Someone had left a jacket for me. I found a note in the pocket with the hospital's name on it. That's how I started looking for you. It took me a week to find you," he said. "The motel clerk didn't know your name. The taxi company didn't keep detailed records. But I'm persistent, Mr. Miller, and I don't give up on things that matter." One of the men who'd been standing back came forward. "This is my son James," Dr. Whitmore said. "He helped me search for you." James nodded at Robert. "We contacted the hospital, but they couldn't give out employee information. We had to do some creative investigating. Talked to a lot of people. Finally, a taxi driver remembered picking up a passenger matching my father's description with a hospital janitor. From there, we narrowed it down." Dr. Whitmore reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "Robert, I've learned a lot about you this past week. I know you're a single father. I know you lost your wife to cancer 3 years ago. I know you've worked at this hospital for 15 years with a spotless record. Everyone I talked to said the same thing about you. You're kind. You're reliable. You're a good man." Robert felt uncomfortable with all this attention. "I'm just a janitor." "You're not just anything," Dr. Whitmore said with surprising intensity. "That kind of thinking is exactly what I want to address." He handed Robert the envelope. "Open it." Robert's hands shook as he opened it. Inside were $100 bills. A lot of them. He counted quickly. 50 of them. $5,000, Dr. Whitmore said. To thank you for what you did. Robert stared at the money. $5,000. It was more money than he'd ever held at once. It was enough to catch up on everything. To give Amy things she needed. To fix his car. To have a cushion for emergencies. It was life-changing, but something felt wrong about it. I can't take this, Robert said, trying to hand it back. Yes, you can. No, I mean I didn't help you for money. I didn't help you expecting anything in return. Dr. Whitmore's eyes got a little watery. I know, that's exactly why you deserve it. Robert, do you know what it's like to live my life? Everyone wants something from me. Everyone has an angle. People are nice to me because I have money, because I have connections, because I can do things for them. But you helped me when I was nobody, when I was just a confused old man dying in the rain. You gave everything you had and you didn't even know my name. I still think, please, Dr. Whitmore said. Let me do this. Let me thank you properly. You sacrificed for me. Now let me help you. Robert looked at the money again. He thought about Amy. He thought about the field trip he couldn't afford. He thought about eating crackers for breakfast. He thought about walking 6 miles to work. Okay, he whispered. Thank you, Dr. Whitmore smiled. Good, but I'm not done. Robert looked up, confused. The money is a thank you, Dr. Whitmore said. But I'm here for another reason. I want to tell you about something I've been working on for years. The other man, the one with the briefcase, came forward. This is my attorney, Mr. Peterson, Dr. Whitmore said. Mr. Peterson opened his briefcase and pulled out some papers. Dr. Whitmore founded the Whitmore Foundation 20 years ago, he explained. It's a nonprofit organization dedicated to medical research and education. We provide scholarships, fund research projects, and support initiatives that improve healthcare. Robert nodded, though he had no idea why they were telling him this. We've been very successful, Dr. Whitmore said. We've helped a lot of people. But recently I've been feeling like something was missing. It's like we weren't capturing the real spirit of what healthcare should be about. He leaned forward. You see, medicine isn't just about science and research. It's about humanity. It's about caring for people when they're at their most vulnerable. And that quality, that compassion, isn't something you learn in medical school. It's something you either have or you don't. Meeting you reminded me of that, Dr. Whitmore continued. Here you were, making barely enough to survive, and you gave away everything to save a stranger. No cameras, no recognition, no expectation of reward, just pure human kindness. He pulled out another document. I've decided to create a new award, the Whitmore Humanitarian Award. It will recognize ordinary people who do extraordinary things, not doctors or scientists or rich philanthropists, regular people who show that kind of selfless compassion. Robert still didn't understand where this was going. Every year we hold a gala in Washington, D.C., Dr. Whitmore said. It's a big event. Senators, doctors, important people from all over the country. This year it's happening in 3 weeks, James jumped in. Over 500 guests. Former presidents have attended. It's televised on C-SPAN. It's kind of a big deal. Dr. Whitmore looked Robert in the eyes. I want you to be there. As my guest of honor. Robert's mouth went dry. I don't know anything about those kinds of events. You don't need to know anything. You just need to be yourself. I want to introduce you to all those important people. I want to tell them your story. I want them to meet the man who reminded me what really matters in life. I couldn't possibly... there's more, Dr. Whitmore said. I want you to present the first Whitmore Humanitarian Award to a nurse from Baltimore who spent her entire retirement savings to open a free clinic in her neighborhood. Someone who, like you, put others before herself. Robert felt dizzy. Dr. Whitmore, I appreciate this, but I'm nobody. I'm a janitor. I don't belong at fancy galas with senators and presidents. That's exactly why you do belong, Dr. Whitmore said. Because you represent something those people need to see. You represent real goodness. Not the kind that comes from having money to donate or time to volunteer. The kind that comes from sacrificing everything when you have nothing to spare. My daughter, bring her. All expenses paid. Hotel, travel, everything. She should see her father honored for the man he is. Robert's mind was racing. This was insane. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. But Dr. Whitmore was looking at him with such genuine warmth, such real respect, that Robert felt something shift inside him. Maybe he did deserve this. Maybe it was okay to accept recognition for doing the right thing. Maybe his daughter deserved to see that kindness mattered. I'll think about it, Robert said. Dr. Whitmore stood and extended his hand. That's all I ask. Think about it. Talk to your daughter, and know that this invitation comes with my deepest respect and gratitude. As Robert shook his hand, he felt the weight of the envelope in his pocket. $5,000. An invitation to Washington, D.C. Recognition for something he'd done without thinking twice. His life had just changed in ways he couldn't begin to understand. That evening, Robert sat at their small kitchen table with Amy, trying to find the words to explain what had happened. The envelope with $5,000 was sitting between them, still feeling surreal even though he could touch it, see it, know it was real. So let me get this straight, Amy said, her eyes wide. You saved some random guy in a storm, and now he wants to fly us to Washington, D.C. to meet important people? That's basically it, yeah. Dad, that's insane. I know. Amy picked up the envelope, felt its weight. This is real money. Like actual real money. I counted it 3 times. She looked at him with those smart eyes of hers, the ones that always seemed too old for her age. What did Mom used to say? About being rich? Robert smiled, feeling that familiar ache in his chest when Amy mentioned her mother. She said, we're richest when we give what we can't afford to lose. You gave away everything you had. I did. And now you're getting it back 100 times. Over? Seems that way. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Amy said, we're going, right? To Washington. Robert had been struggling with this decision all afternoon. Part of him wanted to refuse. The scared part. The part that said people like him didn't belong in ballrooms with senators. The part that said this whole thing was too good to be true and something would go wrong. But there was another part of him. The part that remembered his wife teaching Amy to be brave. The part that remembered doing the right thing even when it was hard. The part that wanted his daughter to see that good things could happen to good people. I don't know how to act at those kinds of events, Robert said. I've never even worn a real suit. I don't know what to say to important people. Amy reached across the table and took his hand. Dad, you're the most important person I know. You work harder than anyone. You're kind to everyone. You raised me by yourself after Mom died. If they can't see how special you are, that's their problem, not yours. Robert felt tears threatening. When did you get so wise? I learned from the best. That night, Robert lay in bed and thought about everything. He thought about his wife, wondering what she would say about all this. He thought about the past 3 years struggling and surviving. He thought about that moment in the rain, kneeling beside a stranger making a choice without knowing where it would lead. The next morning, he called Dr. Whitmore. We'll come, Robert said. Amy and me, we'll be there. He could hear the smile in Dr. Whitmore's voice. I'm so glad. I'll have my assistant send you all the details. And Robert, thank you for everything. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. Dr. Whitmore's assistant, a efficient woman named Patricia, called with travel arrangements. Plane tickets would be sent. A hotel room was reserved at a place called the Willard Intercontinental, which Amy looked up and nearly fainted when she saw how fancy it was. Dad, this hotel has marble bathrooms and room service and everything. But there was still one big problem. Robert didn't own a suit. He had his work uniform, some old jeans, a few t-shirts, and one button-up shirt he wore to church. Nothing appropriate for a gala with 500 important guests. Mrs. Chen noticed him worrying about it at work one day. What's eating you? She asked. Robert told her about the suit problem. About not wanting to embarrass himself or Dr. Whitmore or Amy. About feeling like maybe he'd made a mistake saying yes. Mrs. Chen listened, then said, come with me. She led him to her office. A small cluttered space filled with schedules and supply orders. From her closet she pulled out a garment bag. My late husband, she said softly. He was about your size. He had a beautiful suit he wore to our daughter's wedding. He never got to wear it again before he passed. Robert started to protest, but Mrs. Chen held up her hand. He would have liked you, she said. He would have been proud to know his suit was going to Washington, D.C. on a good man's shoulders. Take it. It's just sitting in my closet gathering dust anyway. The suit fit perfectly. Dark blue, classic, dignified. Amy cried when she saw him try it on. You look like you belong in a magazine, Dad. I look ridiculous. You look handsome. Mom would have loved this. The day before they left, Tom pulled Robert aside at work. Got something for you, he said, handing him a small box. Inside was a watch. Nothing fancy, but nice. A real watch with a leather band. Tom, I can't. Shut up and take it. Can't go to Washington looking like you don't know what time it is. Besides, I've got 3 watches. This one was just sitting in a drawer. Robert looked around at his co-workers, these people who'd quietly supported him through the hardest week of his life. People who left sandwiches in break rooms and offered watches and made him feel like he mattered. Thank you, he said, his voice rough. All of you. For everything. The flight to Washington was Amy's first time on a plane. She pressed her face against the window during takeoff, watching Chicago disappear below them. Robert held her hand, trying not to show how nervous he was. The Willard Hotel was beyond anything Robert had imagined. The lobby had chandeliers bigger than his entire apartment. Men in uniforms opened doors and carried luggage. Everything sparkled and gleamed. Their room was on the 8th floor. 2 beds with covers so white and crisp they looked like they'd never been used. A bathroom with a bathtub you could practically swim in. Windows overlooking Pennsylvania Avenue. Amy ran around the room testing everything. The television, the mini fridge, the complimentary robes. Dad, they have chocolates on the pillows. Free chocolates. Robert stood at the window, looking out at the city. Somewhere out there was the White House, the Capitol building, the Lincoln Memorial, places he'd only seen in pictures. And tomorrow night he'd be at a gala with people who walked these streets like they owned them. His phone rang. Dr. Whitmore. Robert, I wanted to check that you arrived safely. We did. Thank you. The hotel is... It's too much. Dr. Whitmore laughed. Nothing is too much. Now tomorrow evening the gala starts at 7. My son James will pick you and your daughter up at 6:30. He'll make sure you're comfortable, introduce you to people, help you navigate everything. Dr. Whitmore, I have to ask, what exactly do I need to do? I mean, when I present this award, just be yourself. Tell your story if you're comfortable. Talk about what made you help me that night. Speak from your heart. That's all anyone wants to hear. I'm not good at public speaking. You don't need to be good at it. You just need to be honest. Trust me, Robert. You're going to do fine. After they hung up, Robert sat on the bed trying to imagine standing in front of 500 people. Senators, doctors, important people, and him, a janitor from Chicago, telling them about giving away $23 in a storm. Amy sat next to him. You're scared, terrified. Want to know a secret? I'm scared too. I've never been anywhere like this. I don't know how to act around rich people. We'll figure it out together. They ordered room service for dinner, hamburgers and French fries that cost more than Robert usually spent on groceries for a week. They watched movies on the big television. They called down for extra chocolates just because they could. That night, Robert stood on the small balcony outside their room. The city light stretched out in every direction. Tomorrow would change everything. He'd stand in front of people who shaped the world and tell them about a moment when he chose kindness over comfort. He thought about his wife again. About the kind of person she'd raised him to be. About the lessons she'd wanted to pass on to Amy. I hope I make you proud, he whispered to the night sky. Inside, Amy was already asleep, curled up in a bed that probably cost more than their monthly rent. She looked peaceful, happy. Like she deserved to be in a place like this, even though the world had told her she didn't. Tomorrow, Robert would put on a borrowed suit and a gifted watch. He'd walk into a room full of people who'd never cleaned a floor or emptied a trash can, and he'd remind them that dignity doesn't come from what you have. It comes from what you're willing to give. He just hoped he could find the words to say it right. The National Museum of Natural History was transformed into something from a fairy tale. Robert and Amy stepped out of the car James had sent for them, and both of them just stopped and stared. The entrance was lit up with golden lights. People in expensive dresses and tuxedos walked up the steps like they belonged there. Photographers were taking pictures. Everything sparkled. Dad, Amy whispered, gripping his hand. I think we're in the wrong place. We're in the right place, Robert said, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. James met them at the entrance. He was wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than Robert's car, but his smile was warm and genuine. You look great, James said, shaking Robert's hand. Both of you. Ready for this? Not even a little bit, Robert admitted. James laughed. Good, honesty is refreshing. Come on, let me introduce you to some people before things get started. The inside of the museum was even more incredible. A huge hall with dinosaur skeletons and enormous chandeliers. Round tables covered in white cloth and flowers. A stage at the front with a podium and microphones, and everywhere people. Important-looking people talking and laughing and drinking champagne from fancy glasses. Robert felt completely out of place. His borrowed suit suddenly felt too tight. His gifted watch felt heavy on his wrist. He was sure everyone could tell he didn't belong. But then Dr. Whitmore appeared, cutting through the crowd like a ship through water. His face lit up when he saw them. "Robert, Amy, I'm so glad you're here." He hugged Robert, which surprised him. Then he turned to Amy. "You must be the daughter I've heard so much about. Your father talks about you constantly." Amy blushed. "He does?" "Every conversation. You should be very proud of him." "I am," Amy said, and Robert felt his heart might burst. Dr. Whitmore introduced them to what felt like 100 people. A senator from Maryland, a surgeon who'd won some prestigious award, the head of a major hospital in Boston. Person after person, each one shaking Robert's hand, each one looking at him with genuine interest. "So you're the man who saved Harold's life," the senator said. "I've heard the story 3 times already tonight." "Very impressive." Robert didn't know what to say to that. "I just did what needed doing. That's the point, isn't it?" The senator replied. "Most people wouldn't have." Dinner was served at 7. Robert sat at a table near the front with Amy, Dr. Whitmore, and several other people. The food was like nothing Robert had ever seen. Tiny portions arranged like artwork. Amy kept giving him wide-eyed looks across the table. During dinner, Dr. Whitmore stood and gave a speech about the Foundation's work over the past year. Research they'd funded, scholarships they'd provided, lives they'd changed. People applauded politely. Then he said something that made Robert's stomach flip. "Tonight we're doing something different, something special. We're launching the Whitmore Humanitarian Award, which will recognize ordinary individuals who demonstrate extraordinary compassion." The room went quiet. People leaned forward, interested. This award was inspired by a man I met 3 weeks ago, a man who, on the worst night of my life, when I was confused and dying in a storm, gave everything he had to save a complete stranger. No cameras, no recognition, no expectation of reward, just pure human kindness. Dr. Whitmore turned and looked at Robert. "That man is here tonight. Robert Miller, would you please come to the stage?" The applause started. Robert felt frozen. This was it. The moment he'd been dreading and anticipating for weeks. Amy squeezed his hand. "You've got this, Dad." Robert stood on shaking legs and walked to the stage. The walk felt like it took forever. Every eye in the room was on him. 500 important people, all looking at the janitor from Chicago. He reached the podium. Dr. Whitmore was there, smiling, gesturing for the applause to die down. "Robert is going to present our first Whitmore Humanitarian Award," Dr. Whitmore said. "But first I asked him to share his story, to tell us about that night, to remind us all what truly matters." Then Dr. Whitmore stepped back and Robert was alone at the podium with a microphone and 500 expectant faces. His mouth was dry. His hands were shaking. He gripped the podium to steady himself. "I'm not good at speeches," he started, and his voice cracked. He cleared his throat. "I'm a janitor. I clean floors at a hospital in Chicago. I've done that for 15 years. Most days people don't even notice I'm there. And that's okay. That's not a complaint. It's just how it is." He could see people leaning in, listening. 3 weeks ago I finished my shift and found Dr. Whitmore collapsed outside in a storm. He was dying. Anyone could see that. And I had a choice to make. Robert paused, gathering his thoughts. I had $23 in my wallet. That was all the money I had until payday. And I knew if I used that money to help him, I'd be in trouble. Real trouble, no food, no bus fare, nothing. The room was completely silent now. But my wife, before she passed away 3 years ago, she used to say something. She'd say, "We're richest when we give what we can't afford to lose." At the time, I didn't really understand what she meant. But that night, standing there in the rain, looking at this man who needed help, I finally got it. Robert's voice got stronger, more confident. See, if I'd walked away, I would have kept my $23. I would have had bus fare and lunch money. But I would have lost something more important. I would have lost the ability to look at myself in the mirror. I would have lost the right to tell my daughter to be a good person. I would have lost my own humanity. He saw people nodding. Some of them had tears in their eyes. So I gave him everything I had. And yeah, the next week was hard. The hardest week I've had in a long time. I walked to work. I skipped meals. My daughter missed a school trip because I couldn't afford it. But you know what? I'd do it again. Because some things matter more than money. Some things matter more than comfort. Robert looked right at Amy, who was crying openly now. My daughter taught me something through all this. She told me I didn't need to know how to act around important people. She said if you can't see how special someone is, that's your problem, not theirs. And she's right. We spend so much time worrying about what we don't have, what we're not, what we can't do. We forget that the most important things don't cost anything. He looked around the room. Kindness is free. Compassion is free. Choosing to help someone when you don't have to, when it costs you something real, when no one's watching to give you credit for it, that's what makes us human. That's what makes us rich in the ways that actually matter. The applause started before he even finished. It grew louder and louder until everyone in the room was standing. A standing ovation that went on and on. Robert just stood there, overwhelmed, trying not to cry. Dr. Whitmore came back to the podium, his own eyes wet with tears. Thank you, Robert. That's exactly the spirit we want to honor with this award. Robert presented the award to the nurse from Baltimore, a woman named Helen, who'd spent her retirement savings opening a free clinic. She hugged him on stage and whispered, "You're an inspiration." After the ceremony, people kept coming up to Robert, wanting to shake his hand, wanting to hear more of his story. A reporter from the Washington Post asked if she could interview him. Someone from a national news station wanted to feature him in a segment about everyday heroes. James pulled him aside at one point. "My father's not done, you know. He has plans for your story." "What kind of plans?" "Good ones. You'll see." Later, much later, when the gala was winding down and Amy was asleep on his shoulder, Dr. Whitmore sat down next to Robert. "I've made a decision," he said. "I'm creating a scholarship fund, the Robert Miller Scholarship Fund, for children of service workers, janitors, cafeteria staff, security guards, people who keep the world running but don't get recognized for it." Robert was speechless. "Your daughter will be the first recipient," Dr. Whitmore continued. "Full ride to any college she chooses. And after her, hundreds more." Robert couldn't hold back the tears anymore. "Why are you doing all this?" "Because you reminded me what medicine is supposed to be about. What life is supposed to be about, and I want to make sure your message reaches as far as possible." The next morning, the Washington Post ran a front-page story. "The Richest Gift: How a Janitor's Sacrifice Sparked a Movement." Robert's words, "We're richest when we give what we can't afford to lose," became the headline. The story spread. Other newspapers picked it up, then television, then social media. Within a week, Robert's story had reached millions of people. But Robert didn't change. He went back to Chicago, back to his job at the hospital. When reporters asked why he didn't take a better job, he said, "I'm proud of what I do. Every job has dignity. Every person has worth." The scholarship fund grew. Donations poured in from people inspired by Robert's story. Within a year, it had funded education for over 100 children of service workers. Amy went to college on that scholarship. She became a nurse, following in the footsteps of the woman who'd won the first Whitmore Humanitarian Award. She works at the same hospital where her father cleaned floors, but now she sees him as a hero, not a janitor. When Robert finally retired 15 years later, the hospital named their service wing after him. Dr. Whitmore, old but still sharp, attended the ceremony. "You changed my life," Dr. Whitmore told him. "You changed mine too," Robert replied. "No," Dr. Whitmore said. "You changed thousands of lives. Mine was just the first." Robert Miller never became rich in the traditional sense. He never lived in a mansion or drove a fancy car. But he lived to see his daughter graduate from college debt-free. He lived to see hundreds of other children get opportunities they never would have had. He lived to see his story inspire people to choose kindness over comfort. And in the ways that truly mattered, he was the richest man alive.